I stand before these flags today truly humbled and honored by all that they represent. In an age of uncertainty, a pandemic of global proportions, there are those among us who, in the face of it all, they make a daily decision to put their lives on the line, to protect, to defend, to uphold, to heal, to save. Our military, our first responders, our law enforcement, our doctors, our nurses, our firefighters, the EMTs. What does it take to put on that uniform? What does it take to grab that stethoscope on the way out the door with just moments of sleep? What is it that carries them beyond the original adrenaline rush to truly persevere? Hi, my name is Billy Sanderson, and I remember that moment when I got off the bus at basic training in Fort McClellan, Alabama, becoming a military police officer for the United States Army. And I remember that adrenaline, and I remember I thought I could do anything at that moment, but that moment doesn't last. That moment fades away. What is it then that allows us to endure and to persevere? Well, today, I want to talk just for a moment about this concept of persevering, of following through well in the face of uncertain times. You know, as communities and as a nation, we've all been inconvenienced for the sake of humanity. But now, the initial shock of it all is over. I think all of us want things to go back to normal. That new car smell is now gone. So what is it that we do to carry on? We must do so with this enduring pursuit for the greater good. But we must persevere. First, I think we need to identify the difference between perseverance and endurance. For you see, endurance is really the measure of a person's ability to carry on, right? To just continue. Often, this is in terms of pain or a physical attribute. Whereas perseverance then is the capacity of someone's true will. It's the ability to continue on no matter what the circumstance is. Like our law enforcement, our medical professionals, those who are on the front lines, the endurance is now being tested to the point where perseverance is necessary. So then how do we all deal with that? How do we become people of great conviction, not just convenience? For you see, endurance can get you through inconvenience, but perseverance must require conviction. Well, we can look back to antiquity and we can find a word, it's a Greek word, and it's hupomene, and it means to really have almost a cheerful joy in embracing the uncertainty, in looking at pain and looking at uncertainty and saying, not only am I not going to surrender or flee, but I'm going to be brave in embracing whatever suffering lies ahead. And that's what we see right now in our culture, in our society. Truly, we're discovering that once again, heroes don't wear capes. Oftentimes, they put on a badge or a set of scrubs. Oftentimes, we're finding that we've confused fame with significance, as the author and speaker Dennis Prager says. You know, this whole concept of perseverance, it's a lot more emotional than what people really think. We have to understand it's not just an attitude or a state of mind. It's an actual grappling with our emotion. It's an actual process of this understanding that pain is necessary for growth to happen. It's necessary. And although it's painful, we have to admit that when the endurance fades, something has to take over. Something has to step into our arena in order for us to continue on. And that's where we discover perseverance. We have to be able to say, what's on the other side? Endurance gets us to that ledge, but then we say, what's on the other side? We're tired of learning lessons after the fact, where we're not comfortable anymore with just learning a lesson in the present tense. We have to be willing to learn from the totality of humanity. And we have to be able to take all of that knowledge and impart wisdom. And that's where prudence comes in. And right now, more than ever, we need leaders who are willing to look in the face of uncertain times and to still step forward in perseverance. It was Albert Einstein who said, it's not that I'm so smart. It's just that I stay with problems longer. He said, I can is 100 times more important than IQ. I think Albert was onto something. I think he understood that the stick-to-itiveness of life and leadership often leads to greater conquering, greater finish lines, greater, if you will, acts of humanity. It requires great discipline. We have to, perseverance, it requires someone to have a contempt for complacency. And often what we find in leadership and when we face conflict or we face chaos or we face uncertainty, people can become very complacent. And what we find right now is that perseverance demands that we become almost uncomfortable and have a great contempt for complacency. One area in my own life that I discovered this more than ever was as a distance runner. As a distance runner, I had run many races before. I had run, the mile and the 2 mile and the 5K and the 10K. I'd even done the half marathons and some marathons. But then, one of my idols in the running community, if you will, where I grew up, was a gentleman by the name of Mike Spindler. Mike is truly one of the greatest men, but then you add on to it one of the greatest coaches, ambassadors for the sport of running. And I'll never forget a conversation that I had in my early running career with Coach Spindler. He basically told me, I think you should try an ultra marathon. I think you should try to run further than you've ever run before. See, Coach Spindler is, even to this day, still the director of the JFK 50-mile ultra marathon. It's America's oldest. It's one of the legends, if you will. And Coach Spindler looked at me, and we were at Howard College in Maryland. And we were in this room where there was a lot of running greats around us. And I'll never forget this conversation where he told me, he said, if you just get to the starting line, the spirit of the race itself, along with others along the way, it'll get you to the finish line. Now, you'll certainly want to give up. If you certainly get to the starting line Others will be required along the way. And so I agreed, and as I towed the line that November cold morning, I looked around, and all the people around, it was an amazing atmosphere. But it wasn't too long in that race where I wanted to have a few words with Coach Spindler because it was harder than I thought. I got to the halfway point, which is basically a marathon, and thought, wow, I'm only halfway. I have to do this all over again. And the pain sets in, and you come up with every excuse possible to drop out. You come up with every excuse imaginable to turn around or to say, I need help. But then someone comes alongside of you and says, step by step, we can do this. I'll never forget a young lady who had cancer. I was visiting with her in a hospital in Dallas, Texas. And I'll never forget what she told me. She said, inch by inch, life's a cinch. But yard by yard, life is hard. And these people that surrounded me in the midst of this 50-mile ultra marathon just said, you know what, let's just take one more step. Just one more step, just one more step. And before long, each of those steps had led to seeing the glory of the finish line. And when you get there, you understand that the journey was truly worth it all. You understand that the pain that you had to endure and the thresholds of just continuing to put one step in front of the other were truly worth it all. So much so that even though the pain was so intense, I wanted to drop out, and at the finish line literally collapsed. Afterwards, it was so emotional and so life-changing that I said, I want to do it again. And I have. I've actually done it a few times since. So I have people in my own life, like Coach Spindler and others, to thank for pushing me to at least get to the starting line of the challenges in my own life. There's so many examples of this in our culture right now. Whether we look at those who are essential and those who face the front lines and those like our military and our law enforcement and our medical professionals that are there, all the way down through the grocery workers or the truckers. Man, where would our country be without those great men and women who have not only gotten to the starting line, but are enduring the pain, the hupomene, where they're allowing that pain to be put aside for the greater good. What does it look like? What does it look like for us to truly get past the endurance and to find perseverance? Well, if I may, a few examples, a few principles to not only get to the starting line and to get beyond where you've ever gone before. Maybe it's in leadership. Maybe it's in parenting. Maybe it's in a relationship. Maybe it's as a leader in your company or organization. Or maybe you're in a position where you need to lead up really well. We're all in uncertain times. We're all facing situations we never imagined before. And in doing so, there are some characteristics that we need to pay attention to in order to persevere well. In my own life, there was a moment that no one ever is prepared for when my wife and I sat down in that doctor's office and we were told that I had a cancerous tumor in my brain. You're never prepared for that starting line. It doesn't matter what you've been through in your life, and I've been through plenty, just like all of us have. But nothing prepares you for that starting line. And the endurance to just withstand the physical pain of what is to come, we knew back in 2013 when we were at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And they attempted to take one of the tumors. They actually discovered two. When they attempted to take one of those tumors out, it wasn't successful. And so we began to monitor, and then in 2017, the cancerous glioma had gotten too large and we needed to operate. And so in 2017, we had my first brain surgery, followed up in July of 2018 of a second one. And we're so blessed to know that we had unbelievable physicians and staff and friends and family and communities rallying around us and supporting us in that ultra marathon, if you will, of life. Because it had pushed us beyond what we'd ever encountered before. But there's some teachable moments, if you will, along the way. There's some lessons that we can learn, and there's some wisdom and insight that we can glean if we just pause and look through the pain. So allow me to just give you 10 lessons that I think you can learn through going through situations in life, whether it's a global pandemic, whether it's your own health journey, or maybe a relationship struggle. Whatever it is, how do we get past the endurance? How do we take that first step off the finish line? The starting line, excuse me. How do we take that first step and then allow others to help us along the way? Well, the first thing is that we have to maintain a focus in the fog. Because you see, anytime that you're dealing with uncertainty and trouble and trials, there's going to be some fog. There's going to be some unclarity around you, but you must maintain a focus. You have to be able to see the unimaginable beauty on the other side. It's like looking at the word impossible and stopping and redefining that word to say, hold it, I'm possible. It requires a great, great focus. Your senses need to become in tune with what's really at stake. And when you can clarify your focus in the midst of the fog, you're going to be able to take another step and another step and another step. The second thing is to reflect and inspect. Because you see, when you're dealing with leadership or you're dealing with unbelievable uncertainty, what happens is that oftentimes we don't stop, we don't reflect, we don't inspect what's going on. And if I can use a phrase from my physicians at the Mayo Clinic, one of them, I'll never forget, said, I have to examine before I diagnose. And a lot of times we don't reflect or inspect the situation to really examine what's going on. We just jump straight to the diagnosis when the problem is it might be incorrect. And so take the time, have the ability and the capacity to just pause for a second and remember, the leaders, we're brokers in trust. We're brokers in trust, and any leader who does not reflect and examine the circumstances before making the next steps will be one who breaks trust. So not only do we need to maintain our focus in the fog, but we truly need to reflect and inspect. But then, one of the hardest ones, the thirdly, is to be grateful even for the pain. Even for the pain. It's one of the hardest things to tell people when they're going through or recovering from a brain surgery like I had twice. It's one of the hardest things to tell someone when they're struggling in the middle of an ultra marathon and they've reached complete muscle failure, but they have to keep going is, hey, just be grateful. Just be grateful. Oftentimes when people tell you that, you got to be aware that there could be a reaction maybe you're not ready for. But having an attitude and a spirit of gratitude will actually take you further than you think. Because even the pain can be one of our greatest teachers if we allow it to. It's remarkable how people began to respond to me when I showed an attitude of gratitude. And in the midst of uncertainty and in trying to capture the essence of perseverance in your own leadership, be grateful. Be grateful. Take the time to reflect on those who have had an impact on you and be grateful. Reach out to them. I've often reached out to the people in my life who have been part of that journey along the way. Yes, even some of those who in the midst of one of those ultra marathons came up beside me and said, just take another step, just another step. Or who came over and were there to help us along the way in our recovery. Which leads to the next step. The next characteristic is the power of the pause. The power of the pause. When you're recovering physically, you have to rest. You have to rest well. And when you're an athlete in the middle of an ultra marathon, you have to think about resting. You have to think about how your body is going to recover and rest well. Well, it's the same thing in leadership. It's the power of the pause. When leaders have the capacity to take a moment and to pause and to understand the need for rest, to understand the need to be able to check out and to shut the laptop and to go and to fulfill themselves with what brings them a fullness. For me, I love being outside. And as an outdoorsman, for me it was I needed to get back just to the outside. Even if it was just taking a walk with my family around the neighborhood, or even going out on my in-laws' property and just walking around through the trees and watching the wildlife. Whatever it is for you as a leader, in order to have perseverance, you're going to have to understand that you have to rest well. You have to be able to press pause, because if you can't press pause, you will inevitably burn out. And you're no good for anyone if you're completely burned out. Which leads us into the next characteristic, and that's being self-aware. Being self-aware. For you see, leaders that try to get through the endurance and get beyond the adrenaline rush of the beginning, even like our culture is dealing with now. There was that immediate attention to social distancing and the immediate attention to everyone working from home, and it almost brings an excitement about it, and it's a new thing, and so everyone is operating on adrenaline and how do we get through this and do this. But then comes that surge, then comes that time when that endurance fades and we have to lean into our perseverance. And if we are not self-aware in those moments, if we don't understand our own ability and capacity, if we can't keenly recognize not only our strengths, but our opportunities for growth, and if we aren't willing to be honest with ourselves, we'll never make it to the finish line. See, perseverance demands of us that we be self-aware. Not only that, but in those moments, we have to pause again and look for teachable moments. For you see, there's no greater teacher than pain. There's no greater lessons learned than those who are able to get past not just the finish line, but the pain through getting beyond the suffering to the finish line. There are so many great lessons, and this is such an amazing opportunity for us to look for the teachable lessons in it all. As I went about doing my second ultramarathon and then a third, there were so many lessons that I had learned from the first ones, such as the importance of moleskin, such as the importance of staying hydrated. And in our cancer recovery journey, there were so many lessons that we had to stop and look at. And if we weren't willing to stop, and especially from a leadership perspective, and if we weren't willing to learn, and if we weren't willing to look at the teachable moments all around us, we would have never been able to continue on to see the glory of the finish line. And then we need to learn to reset in the setbacks. Reset in the setbacks. You know, there will be those peaks and valleys. It's not all going to be a glorious journey. There will be times that you will have setbacks. There will be times that maybe they're caused by someone else. You know, in one of the ultra marathons that I ran, there was someone who accidentally tripped me, and I took a hard fall, and that actually set me back quite a bit. But then it's having the ability and the capacity to reset. Maybe it's your own fault. Maybe you've made some decisions as a leader that have consequences. Are you able to reset? Are you able to look at your now situation and the present tense and say, I can reset and still move on? Because if you can't reset in your setbacks, you'll never reach the finish line. You'll never get to that mountaintop. You'll never experience what it is, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're a leader or whether you're just someone who's just trying to get by day. You'll never make it to the end if you can't reset in the setbacks. Because as the setbacks come, you know, let's be honest, things don't always go as planned, do they? Things don't always work out in the best interest of what we originally thought. And so we have to be willing to embrace those times. And we have to be willing to say, not only am I going to learn from this setback, but I can reset in this moment and regroup and continue to move on. Another thing that we have to do, and this is a hard one, especially for people like me who are so relationally driven, is we have to know, who do we need to kick out of our village? You know, there's an old proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child, right? It takes a village. That we have to surround ourselves with others. We have to. Now, we also have to understand that getting through enduring pain and situations, we also have to understand that in that village, we can also choose who shouldn't be there. And oftentimes, leaders make great mistakes of keeping people around for way too long. Oftentimes, leaders allow people to become complacent. Leaders allow people to become mediocre. Leaders allow people to actually resist the vision instead of enhancing the vision. These people become toxic. And as leaders, we need to be able to make the hard decisions of who shouldn't be in my village. You know, when I was doing my ultra marathons, there were those who told me, you shouldn't do it. It's too painful. Why on earth would you even want to try that? I needed to not listen to those voices, because if I had, I would have never even gotten to the starting line. Surely would have never experienced the thrill that only a handful of people get of running down that avenue in Maryland at the finish line of the JFK to the thousands of people screaming and cheering you on with the big banners and arches and getting that coveted finisher medal. It's amazing what happens when we listen to people we shouldn't listen to begin with. Choose who you lose. Because in your village, if there are those who are toxic or even those who are discouraging, you have to be willing to let them go, to persevere and to move forward. Certainly, we see this throughout our lives in relationships. We see this in many different situations that we face, whether it be leadership, whether it be relationships in our lives. We have to be willing to make those hard decisions. Another characteristic of perseverance is to be humble in your skills and abilities, but then to be honest in your gaps. Hone your skills, sharpen those talents. You have them for a reason. That's the beauty in diversity, is that we're all created uniquely different. And it's amazing to watch that happen, especially in a team environment. But as a leader, make sure that you're humble in those skills, honing those skills, ever learning, but then be honest in your gaps. Be honest that you can't do it all. Be honest that you need help along the way. The greatest leaders that I've ever known have been those that have the unique capacity to work in their lane extremely well, in their gifts and talents and abilities, but then to recognize what they can't do well and to surround themselves with those people. For see, when that happens, then what you're doing is you're being just like that skilled surgeon with the scalpel. He's not doing it all. He has such a supporting cast in that operating room that's helping him help others. Or even in those ultra marathons, like the JFK, every 5 miles at a certain point, there's an aid station. And they're there to support you and to encourage you and to help you along the way. We all need to be humble in our skills and abilities and to be honest in our gaps. For you see, that's where the perseverance magic comes into play. And then, finally, we understand the power. We need to understand the power of our needs. The power of our needs. And then understand the power of the ability of others to meet them. For see, in perseverance, it's not enough to just get beyond the endurance. But so many people then stop and think that they have completed or finished, but oftentimes it's not getting to fruition. It's not getting to the actual finish line. It's almost like they make it 40 miles and then think they've arrived in a 50-mile race. Or it's almost like, well, that's great. I finished my surgery, or I've got this new leadership role. However, what's next? And leaders who operate in perseverance well understand that I cannot minimize the needs that I have or the power of others to step in and meet them. It's amazing, as I've gone to some of those races since then, and I've been able to be at those aid stations, and I've been able to be an encouragement for others. And as people take on these epic athletic endeavors, some of them forget things, small things, big things. Maybe they forgot the moleskin, but I'm able to be there, meet that need for them in that moment that's going to help them get to their finish line. there's such great power in that. So never minimize your need to get through whatever it is you're facing, whether it's this global pandemic that we experience now. Even in this video, we've had people that have come in and have sanitized this room so that we could be here. And then when we leave, we're going to go through the appropriate measures, and that professional company is going to come back in and they're going to redo it. Why? Because we want to make sure that we are operating at a level of perseverance that meets other people's needs, not just ours. And right now we're seeing that with such beauty on display in our culture. Companies changing what they do to provide medical equipment for those on the front lines. Or the teachers that are doing these parades in front of their students to just give them a moment of connectivity and to say we're still here. What we're seeing is the power to step in and to help meet the needs of others so that when we have needs, we don't minimize them, but we lean into the power of others to meet them. Those that have true perseverance understand this principle and understand that it's absolutely necessary to get to that finish line. Let me give you one more as a bonus. And this is, don't waste your time with people who waste your time. Don't waste your time with those who are going to waste your time. It's not like our friends when we can finally get back together again and, you're getting together with a water cooler talk or, just getting together for a cup of coffee or just getting together and telling those fishing tales or those hunting stories or even how you got through the pandemic. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the consistent patterns of people that waste your time. Or maybe it's a hobby. Or maybe it's something that you do or partake in that wastes the energy that is needed to persevere on. And we have to be honest with ourselves and say, there are those, maybe people, individuals, circumstances, hobbies, maybe it's an addiction, that has held us back from persevering through trials in our lives. If we're willing and honest and open, we can allow others to be a support mechanism and to help us through so that we can reach whatever those finish lines are, whatever those priorities that are established, those goals that you have set out, whatever it is, through this situation, through this season. If you make those hard choices, you too will get whatever finish line medal it is that you're after. Because you see, in our culture, in our leadership right now, it requires that we go beyond just the ordinary and we discover the extraordinary. We have to endure through the pain in the moment to persevere for the long run. And when you do that, not only are you leading transformationally, but you're leading the way for others to get to their own starting lines. And when you do that long enough, as I have, it's been amazing to watch how I've been able to be a support system for others to get to their starting lines, but then to help them through to their finish lines. And when you do that enough, it is an unbelievable celebration. It brings such a joy that is indescribable, because what you're doing is you're helping humanity accomplish what they never thought possible. And when you do that long enough, you'll discover the art of perseverance. Why don't you just take a moment today? Just reflect look at the white paper that's attached to this video with these principles that have been outlined. Or even better yet, why don't you take a moment today to stop and to thank your local law enforcement? Why don't you take a moment and thank those first responders? Why don't you take a moment and reach out to them and see what would mean the most to them right now? Maybe they need more protective equipment. Maybe they need baked goods. Maybe they need some support, but whatever it is, why don't you reach out to that friend, that neighbor, that relative, and just give them a thanks for getting beyond the endurance and to persevering for us all. Reach out to that small business owner that you know and say, hey, what can we do to support you and help you in this time? Because when as humanity we gather together and rally like we never have before, and we persevere through it all, we're going to define a greater good that none of us thought could be possible. You know, I just want to end with a thanks. Thank you for taking the time to join us today in listening and learning about how do we persevere through it all. Whether it's our relationships, whether it's our companies, our leadership, how do we persevere well? And then we just want to take a moment to again thank our local leaders, our national leaders, those that serve us well through the law enforcement, the military, the EMT, the first responders, the doctors, the nurses, all of the medical professionals that are out there now. Thank you. Sincerely, all that these flags represent, you represent the best of all of us right now. Thank you.